everybody, it's that time again when it's potato time, and we've bought our potatoes and it's time to chit them. What is chitting? Now, the research actually shows that chitting doesn't have a lot of benefit in terms of the crops of the potato, but I think chitting your potatoes have a benefit in other ways, which I'm going to explain to you. So we've decided not to grow as many potatoes this year as we've done in previous years, just because I think we've found that we're eating less potatoes than before. So I'll show you which varieties we're growing this year. And the first one, so potatoes come in three different sorts really. You get first earlies, and things like Swift and some other things are in that category, and they don't take long before they're ready to dig up. They tend to have a lighter crop and smaller potatoes, which is great. We grow second earlies, which has a very good crop, and so the second earlies take a little longer to grow than the first earlies, but not as long as the main crop potatoes, which stay in the ground quite a while. With first and second earlies, you don't need to what they call mound them up, put the soil around them so much, because they grow slightly differently from main crop potatoes, but I'll tell you about that as we go along. So they're the three sorts: first earlies, second earlies and main crop. As I said, we only grow second earlies, and that's because we get blight, potato blight on our site, and the potato blight can completely wipe out your crops. Usually our second earlies are ready before the blight comes along. Not always, but on the whole, they ripen and are ready to lift before the blight comes along. The downside slightly is that they don't store as well as main crop potatoes. So you have to choose what you want, depending on what you want to do with them and what kind of potato and what variety of potatoes you want to grow. And there are many, many in all three categories that you could choose. So have a little look on websites and things, and also ask other people around you to what grows well in your area and maybe on your site. Because I've found some potatoes which people have sung the praises for just haven't really done particularly well on my plot. So you need to experiment a bit. So after a lot of experimenting, the potatoes that we've come up with, or the selection of potatoes we've come up with, are second earlies Charlotte, and these are sort of all-round potatoes. They're good for mashing, chipping, roasting, everything. Salads, they're lovely. So we do grow slightly more of those. Sagitta, and these Sagitta have a lovely flavour. They can be a bit bigger, but they're particularly recommended for things like roasting and chipping a good potato. And the other one we grow is Kestrel. And this is a recent potato that we've been growing, Kestrel, again a second early. And we've found it's a really nice potato. It cooks well. I don't know what it says. Is this particularly high yield? It doesn't say exactly what it's specialising in, but we've found that they do produce some very large potatoes, a bit like the Sagitta do too, and they're good for baking. So we use these for everything, but they are particularly good for growing some extra large ones for baking later on in the year. So they're our three potatoes. That's our mainstay for the site. But I do like a little bit of salad potatoes. Sometimes that's pink fir apple, and sometimes it's this one, Anya. And they say Anya is a good one because it's not quite so knobbly and therefore easier to peel. And I have a funny feeling, oh no, it is a second early. For a moment I thought it might be a main crop, but no, it's a second early and Anya. And there are far too many in here for me. So I will chit some, but also see if I can either do a little swap, or if not, I'll give some away, because I don't have the space to grow all of these. So when we talk about chitting, what is it that we're trying to do? Well, you can see that the potatoes come in these net bags. Sometimes, very rarely, you can go into a garden centre and they have loose potatoes and you can put them in paper bags. But on the whole, they tend to be in these netting bags. And you can see that they're already just beginning to sprout here. So little sprouts are coming up. If you leave this in the netting, all these sprouts grow long and you just end up with a great big mess in a few weeks' time. So although there may not be a particular reason in terms of increasing your crop size, there's definitely a more practical reason in terms of not having some curly mess. And when you try to take them out of the bags, these shoots that you rely on for your plants tend to break off. So you damage the seed potatoes. So these will go out and I will show you what we mean by chitting. Now, the other thing is that buying seed potatoes can be much more expensive. And I've heard many people say, well, I've just popped to the supermarket, I bought some potatoes and I popped them in the ground and they're fine and they do really well. And you can do that and they do grow and you can get a crop. The only problem is you don't know the source of those potatoes. So you can be introducing disease and pests onto your site and in the area where you're growing those potatoes. Seed potatoes are actually a first crop. In other words, they haven't been grown from other seed potatoes. They're the first crop and they're grown particularly for growing on. So they are guaranteed to be disease and pest free. Not always the case, but on the whole, that is true. So if you're concerned that you might not want to bring in pests and diseases into your plot, then I feel that it's better to start from your own seed potatoes or buying seed potatoes. And I have grown from my own crop. The second year I've saved some and grown, but then after that I'll revert back to buying my own seed potatoes again. So you can choose what you want to do. If your budget's tight, you might think, well, you'll just grow what you pick up in the supermarkets or shops or whatever. But just beware, you can be introducing pests and diseases. So what to chit your potatoes in? You can chit them in anything that will help them stand up. Saved egg boxes, even some seed trays, or what I use, because you can see a big bag has got quite a few in, I use these mushroom boxes. The benefits are that they stack. You can get them, you can pick these up free of charge because the supermarkets and shops are always throwing them away. And I much prefer to keep them and then recycle them again the following year. So it's reusing plastic, which would be a single use. So these are great. It doesn't matter what colour they are. They have these little legs that stack up. So with the, these are normally mushroom boxes. So with the mushroom boxes, I tend to just put a little bit of newspaper. That stops all the dirt falling through. It keeps the air circulating as well. And also sometimes the potatoes do rot, which is why you should check them fairly regularly when they're chitting, and it just saves whatever you're resting your potatoes on. So let's look at these kestrels, because the tops are breaking off already as I'm moving them around. So I'm just going to open them up, and you can see now, as I said to you, they're beginning to chit, having a little shoot already. Now, some people say you shouldn't allow more than 3 of these shoots on any one plant, but I don't really bother with that. I just, unless there's loads, which there doesn't tend to be, if there's 3 or 4, that's fine. And you've also got to remember that when you put them into your trays, there is a top and a bottom. So the top is where you see the eyes, and if it's shooting like this one, the shoots. And at the bottom, and I don't know whether you can see that, let me just see if I can find one that's, we'll give it a try. Let's have a look at this one. So at the bottom, there's a little tiny bit just there. Just there. I don't know whether you can see that at all, but that is where the potato was joined to the plant. Just a bit like an umbilical cord, really, a little dot. And that is the bottom. So you put the potatoes in wherever you're going to chip them, that way up, and also into the soil when you're planting them. But by the time you get the shoots, you'll know which way up they are. So I'm going to stack the mushroom trays. But as I said, you can use these egg boxes, discarded egg boxes, and you could ask your friends and neighbours to save them for you, and they stand up like this. So that's quite easy. Or, as I've said, in some seed trays, it gets a little trickier when the potatoes are a bit larger. Like, for example, oh no, that fits fine. So use anything. You don't have to buy anything special. All you want to do is pop them in some trays, and then when you're finished doing that, store them somewhere, put them somewhere that's cool, that you can get daylight, but it's definitely frost-free, because the potatoes will be harmed if you get a cold frost at night. And you don't want it too warm, because those shoots will get leggy sprouts. You know, like sometimes when you go to your cupboard and you pull out potatoes for tea, and they've got all these long leggy shoots, that's what will happen to them. So it's really important that wherever you put them is cool to stop that growth spurt. You're looking for something about a chicken's egg size or a duck egg size a potato. So ideally sort of this size. However, there are many people who cut larger potatoes like this one. They'll cut that in half, but you need to do this before planting, because you need the cut edge to heal. And to do that, you cut it and leave it to dry and then chit it. So if I wanted to cut this, I would do it now, leave the edges to dry, and then hopefully you can see that there are some lower shoots coming, and let those, or encourage those to shoot. So you could get 2 lots of potatoes out of here. Now, I haven't personally done any experiments about does this impact on the yield or anything, because to be truthful, I can't be asked to do it. It's just another job, and I've got too much else to be doing. So I just plant it like this. But obviously, if you're on a tight budget and you've spent a lot of money on seed potatoes, it could well be worth you doing it. And the loss in the crop size may be very little, if any. So again, it's worth doing. So you could experiment to see if there's any difference. But I just plant the whole thing, really. The other thing some people do is, even though you could cut this in half, they sometimes cut it again and just take the chits. So this would be a quarter, so you get 4 planting potatoes from this one potato. And again, you'd have to do the same thing. You'd do it around about now, let the cut side dry and heal over before you'd even plant it. So you could try and experiment with those kind of things. And to be honest with you, maybe I should, just to see whether the yields are any different. But I'm not going to do it this year. I've definitely got too much going on to do that, because I'd need to make sure I've got some trial space to grow them in, and I don't. So you choose how you want to do it. As I said, if you are short on a bit of budget and you've spent a lot of money on the seed potatoes, it could well be worthwhile. And lastly, don't forget to label your potatoes, because once you've got them in the bag, in the baskets here, or in egg boxes, you'll be surprised. You'll forget which varieties there are, particularly if you're growing more than one. So either label the egg boxes, or these come with these little tags which I clip onto the basket so I know which variety is which, because in the past I've forgotten and I've paid the price for that. So just a little bit of interesting information. You can see on here the label, it says seed potatoes, Charlotte, main crop. I've never treated these as a main crop, but if you actually look on the bag says, these are Charlottes, this is what I've just cut the label from, second earlies. So, controversy there. I've always treated them as a second earlies, but we will see. I don't know why suddenly the label is saying main crop. So I've just put the Anya into chit, and actually these are a bit larger in terms of these bits than I'd like. I'd prefer them when they're really small like that, because they were tricky to get out of the bag, as I explained before, and I broke off some of the shoots, so I'll have to try and get my potatoes a little earlier next year and chip them. But as I was sorting these ones out, unlike all the others, these did have some damaged plants. And you know what I said before about when they're cut, they kind of have a callus on them, they dry. Well, this is what it looks like. So these potatoes, there's a few potatoes here that have been cut, probably while lifting them. And where they've been cut, oops, they've calloused over and caused, you know, this hard skin. So you could theoretically plant that, but as I've got so many, I won't bother. The other thing is I picked out a number of potatoes that are damaged, and I only had them in these Anyas, none of the other potatoes, and I've never had a bad seed potato in the other varieties, but this has got just a few, not many, but I'm going to throw these in the bin because A, they can contaminate the other potatoes and get them rotting, so you'll lose them, or B, I don't know what this rotting is and I really don't want to put it in my soil. So I'm going to put these in our brown bin, which is for council composting. I wouldn't put it personally in my personal compost bins for those reasons. And the other thing is sometimes they don't decay and you get potatoes growing in your compost bin. So for those reasons, I'm not going to put them, I'm going to just throw them in what we call our brown bin for composting. And we're still eating last year's potatoes. And I just wanted to mention that out of the three varieties, I must say that the Kestrel and the Sagitta have stored much better. We store them in a very cold shed covered with some Hessian sacks to cut out the light, and in things a bit similar to this where it's airy. And definitely the Charlottes have started to sprout, but the Sagittas and the Kestrels are still in really good condition. So that's a thought as well if you wanted to store your vegetables or your potatoes. Most often, most people have eaten them by now. So there we are. Charlotte's, Sagitta, I think these are. Yep, Sagitta, Anya's, and what did I say these were? Oh my heavens, hang on, let me just have a quick look at the label. See, I've forgotten already. Kestrel. Yep, and Kestrel all in their boxes, ready to chit, and a great big mess on the table for me to clear up. But at least they're done now.